thank you for tuning in today for this edition of our Midweek Encouragement. I appreciate you joining us today. It won't be long, I hope and pray, until we're all together once again in a Sunday service. So keep praying about that, and hopefully as things continue to progress, we'll be able to gather together all in one building at one time once again. I don't know about you, but I'll certainly never take that for granted again. But thank you for joining us. This is Pastor Rice, hunkered in the bunker from Syracuse, Utah, and we are thrilled to be able to be with you like this evening. Thank you. Today, I want us to begin a journey. It's going to take us a while to get through it, but the whole intent of the journey is to reveal Jesus, to look at Him as He is presented in the Bible. And in doing so, it's going to take us a while perhaps to get through it, but just bear with me. Read the scriptures as we go through them, and let's see what you can learn. Today, if you would, as any time that we're doing live stream, if you would comment, if you would put an emoji down there somewhere, whatever it is that you need to do to show that you are online, that you are with us, it certainly helps our feed along. So bless you and thank you for joining us today. I'd like to share with you a bit of a glimpse of the very beginning. Now, I'm going to basically read to you just a very small snippet out of the book called A Gentle Thunder by Max Lucado. So just go on this little trip with me. Seated at the great desk, the author opens the large book. It has no words. It has no words because no words exist. No words exist because no words are needed. There are no ears to hear them, no eyes to read them. The author is alone. And so he takes the great pen and begins to write. Like an artist gathers his colors and a woodcarver his tool, the author assembles his words. There are three single words. One of these three will pour a million thoughts, but on these three words, the story will suspend. He takes his quill and spells the first, T-I-M-E. Time did not exist until he wrote it. He himself is timeless, but his story would be encased in time. The story would have a first rising of the sun, a first shifting of the sand, a beginning and an end, a final chapter. He knows it before he writes it. Time, a footspan on eternity's trail. Slowly, tenderly, the author writes the second word. It's a name, A-D-A-M. As he writes, he sees him, the first Adam. Then he sees all the others and 1,000 eras and 1,000 lands. The author sees them, each Adam, each child, instantly loved, permanently loved. To each he assigns a time. To each he appoints a place. No accidents, no coincidences, just design. The author makes a promise to these unborn. In my image I will make you. You will be like me. You will laugh. You will create. You will never die. And you will write. They must, for each life is a book, not to be read, but rather a story written. The author starts each life story, but each life will write his or her own ending. What a dangerous liberty. How much safer it would have been to finish the story for each Adam, to script every option. It would have been simpler. It would have been safer. But it would not have been love. Love is only love if chosen. So the author decides to give each child a pen. Write carefully, he whispers. Lovingly, deliberately, he writes the third word, already feeling the pain. E-M-M-A-N-U-E-L. The great mind of the universe imagined time. The truest judge granted Adam a choice, but it was love that gave Emmanuel, God with us. The author would enter his own story. The Word would become flesh. He too would be born. He too would be human. He too would have feet and hands. He too would have tears and trials. And most importantly, he too would have a choice. Emmanuel would stand at the crossroads of life and death and make a choice. The author knows well the weight of that decision. He pauses as he writes the page of his own pain. He could stop. Even the author has a choice. But how can a creator not create? How can a writer not write? How can love not love? So he chooses life, though it means death, with hope that his children will do the same. So the author of life completes the story. He drives the spike in his flesh and rolls the stone over his own grave, knowing the choice he will make, knowing the choice all Adams will make. He pens the end. Then he closes the book and proclaims the beginning. Let there be light. Now, that gives us a bit of an impression of how it all began. Certainly the moment of the coming of Jesus was not thought up overnight, but was planned out ahead of time. Not only had the Lord known that this day was coming, but he let the secret out a number of times. So let's take a look at that. The Gospels give essential insights for humanity. The Gospels give essential insights for humanity. So let's take this little journey, and let's do a little pretending. Let's pretend for a bit that this is kind of like a movie script, if you will, and each of the Gospel writers are part of this whole scene, and the whole point of all of this is simply to see Jesus without the filters. Okay? We're surely somewhat familiar with what filters are with our technology these days. So let's start this journey seeing Jesus in this way. Let's say you and I have just landed in Israel. We get off the plane along with a number of others whom we discover to be video and photojournalists. They're all carrying all kinds of gear, and although they know a little bit about each other, all four of them are working independently. For the most part, their mission is going to be simply to help us see Jesus. So there's the first guy over there with the big boom mic. You not Lenny here, but a big boom mic that hangs over with the windproof fuzzy cover on it. Well, his name is Mark, not the microphone, the man with the microphone. Mark has a knack for capturing dramatic and getting his camera right in the middle of it. As we review his footage, you're going to be amazed at a breathtaking glimpse that he gives us of Jesus. Even though he doesn't have a big team, Mark's director will get him most of what he needs. Simon, we'll call him Rocky, he'll give the close-up access that Mark needs so that we can see the best cinematic effects. Our next and perhaps most epic producer is Matthew, and he's not making a movie for most of us. In fact, he intends for his audience to be Jews, and for the Jews then to see Jesus. Oh, he doesn't mind if we benefit from his work, but he works fully aware of the needs of his very Jewish audience. Of course, he knows that a number of them are going to be upset with what they see when they examine Jesus through his lens, but video journalists try to get the facts and present an honest reality. Those who find his work offensive will at least have a clear picture of why they're upset. Next, there's a sharply dressed man who doesn't appear to know his way around Israel as well as the others. His name is Luke. And his documentary should provide a very, very detailed reporting on Messiah. He has the biggest team. He's going to interview a lot more people. And he doesn't just capture the high drama moments, but he also goes backstage and he shows us the outsiders. His documentary will have cameos of several women in his, and he gives them a fair balance of screen time. He doesn't intend for this to be a one and done sort of film. He intends to feed into a sequel, the next of his blockbuster dramas, if you will, which we'll have to sit down and look at some other time. The last of these journalists is John. John doesn't carry much equipment. He works alone. Sometimes he does his own stunts, though you're not going to see his name in the credits. The striking difference between John and all the others is that he's not even carrying a camcorder, if you will. He carries a 45 megapixel DSLR camera with a zoom lens. He spends hours setting up to capture just the right scene. Location, lighting, the angle, all of the subjects. Of course, the autofocus is always set on the man from Nazareth. But the other characters we find in John's frames help us see Jesus differently than the other journalists see him. Now, maybe you would think that one of these four is not necessary. I mean, after all, aren't they all going to repeat each other's work? They're all reporting on the same man and the same events. Won't they be bumping into each other and crowding into the shots? Well, there's a couple of times that one might come into the view of another, but honestly, it just helps keep it more real. By looking at each of them in turn, we find that just a one-dimensional version of Jesus. We find more than just a one-dimensional version of Jesus. This is a more real thing than any reality television has ever been. It's better than any 3D film festival. It's going to beat any virtual reality adventure, and of course with a little help of Jesus himself. So where do we start? How do we do this? Well, Mark would be kind of fun. He kind of starts right in the middle of everything. He's focuses on this rugged-looking outdoor fella screaming into the camera, "Repent!" It's a great place to start and fine introduction to Jesus. Luke goes back further and spotlights the parents of that same wild man of the wilderness. And a lot of people kind of yawn their way through Elizabeth and Zechariah. But that introductory scene actually sets the stage for everything that's going to happen in the story later on. Matthew's opening sequence goes even further back, and he shows a number of Jewish legends in their history. Abraham, King David. When he starts there, all of his Hebrew readers know that this is not some ordinary film, because we get a longer glimpse of some of even the godless members of the supporting cast. There's Tamar. Her rather colorful life had blacklisted her from most. Ruth, she came from a godless place. Rahab, a former prostitute. And even though she was not directly named, there's Bathsheba, who was an adulteress. So if you were not on the edge of your seat already, you probably have spilled some popcorn. and listening up and paying attention to what's happening. If these kinds of people are just in the introduction, what in the world's the story going to be about? So, though Matthew takes us back to the beginning of everything that is Jewish or Hebrew, uh, Luke reaches even further. In a later clip by introducing Jesus' ancestry, and he goes all the way back to Adam. But better yet, there's John, master of the still shot, the focus. He takes us to the best opening scene of all time. In the beginning. We want to see Jesus with no filters, no Photoshop, no pixelation, no extras, no fluff, if you will. We just want to see Jesus. There are a number of filters in our world around us, some of which we've looked at Jesus through. There's religions, there's denominations, theologians, and quite honestly, Jesus often gets pixelated or distorted because we're getting from those filters a second-hand image that's not clear. It's pixelated. It's distorted. And we need to see through the clear view of the authorized producers of the story and actually look at these stories and decide how that's going to change us, because you can't view the unfiltered raw Jesus without it changing you somehow. That's just the reality of it. Jesus has a way of doing more than just showing us. He has a way of changing. Typically, individuals will view one gospel at a time, or maybe in just little pieces like a random news feed of different memes. But through this time that we are having together, we're going to bring all of these journalists together as some kind of a collage and try to show everything in the order of how it happened. So without adding anything to these four historians, we're going to discover things that are going to literally reshape our daily lives, no matter how long any of us have been religious in any way, shape, or form. Kind of an interesting way of looking through all of this is a way of looking at both the Old and the New Testament. Especially in the Old Testament, there was a way that the writers had of kind of leaking out the secret of this coming Messiah. Leaking secrets is big business. It's a marketing strategy that huge industries use for kind of whetting the appetite of people for their next, latest, and greatest projects. Apple is a master of the secret leaks. Sometimes they'll leak secrets to test the market and see if the public's going to be excited about something like $1,000 phone. Other times maybe they release only a part of the information, or they leak it out kind of in an obscure fashion so that the competition's going to misunderstand what's going on. Ralston, the maker of pet foods, did this with pet food as well. It goes on and on. You can go industry after industry, company after company. Larger companies have PR people that know exactly how to master the art of leaking secrets that in a public stance is not supposed to be out there. So, when we follow the narrative of the Bible, it appears that the Creator had some information leaks. He used his own marketing strategy over time. So slowly and somewhat infrequently, communications from headquarters, if you will, slipped the story out about some big changes that are going to be coming. Apparently, the competition chased after the wrong thing, because had the enemies had known, if they had known what God's mystery was all about, they certainly would have handled things differently when Jesus came. Instead, They were the goons, if you will, when the big event happened. The useful tools in that moment. Perhaps this will help you understand a little bit about the Old Testament. The Old Testament, in many ways, is a series of leaks of classified information. That, of course, there's no WikiLeaks in that time, but God did speak to writers, prolific writers like Isaiah. Isaiah wrote, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." Not only would a child come, but he would rule and be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. It was a secret that many talked about over time afterwards, but really didn't fully understand. So when we come to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, then we've got official press releases, if you will. In fact, that's kind of how you need to understand the New Testament. It's the full disclosure manual on the greatest improvement, the greatest event in human history, as well as some leaked information about the next big event. So this is why we want to get it from the source and not just listen to what other people are saying about what the press releases are saying. We want to get it directly from the source. The problem with most Bible enthusiasts is that they take random tweets or 30-second clips from corporate, and they try to tell us what to think about what we're reading or seeing. We don't want secondhand leaked information. We want to know what the author says, but also what else was the topic in context when that was said. There are so many Christian crazy misunderstandings out there. Most Christians, believers, have gotten it wrong because they follow the snapshots and what somebody said you should believe about it rather than looking at the whole story for themselves. They don't want to see the whole movie. They just want to quote the cool lines like they've been there themselves. But as real followers of Christ, as disciples, we need to comb through the Bible like an investigator would. We need to be catching clues and discovering top secret revelations. And understand, of course, when we do that, raw information always has context. And if you've been around me at all, you know how serious I am about getting context. From the beginning, human beings have often missed the true story. So let me give you some examples of some of those leaked sound bites that kind of threw people off. So when Jesus first came, they kind of misunderstood who and what he was, because they misunderstood all of the leaks from the past. So Genesis 3, you've got the mention of a snake crusher that was coming. And Eve, the first woman, was looking for her offspring, a promised offspring that would smash the serpent, that despicable, wicked serpent that had deceived her. If she thought it was her firstborn son, Cain, I'm sure she was sadly disappointed. But afterward, women everywhere certainly hoped that their offspring, their son, would be the one to solve all of the problems. In Daniel chapter 9, the anointed prince was going to come. And passages there spoke of a Messiah, a deliverer, a great ruler that would come. The people would begin looking for a king, a powerful military leader. And all this was good information, but they jumped to conclusions too fast because they didn't get the whole story. Many, many millions missed Jesus physically when he was here because they were looking for him to come in the wrong door. Then you, of course, got Isaiah. He talks about, in Isaiah 53, a suffering servant that would take abuse. Now that left a number thinking that it only referred to the nation, and they couldn't understand how a hero could be both servant and king. And then, of course, the Christmas time favorite, Isaiah 9 and 6, a son would be born, but would be recognized as the eternal Father. And some have taken this little memo and ignored it because they just don't understand how that could be possible. Others try to twist it and say what they think it should say because they don't see how it fits in the larger picture. But you're with me here through this medium because you and I want to know the whole story, not just a taste here and there. We want to know it from its source. We're hungry. And I assure you, God planned out this story even before the dawn of time. The story should shock us. It should make us laugh, cry. If the story itself doesn't move you, then maybe you haven't seen it clearly. We could spend weeks upon weeks looking at various religious filters in our world and how each of them have distorted some of the bits of leaked information over eons of time. However, it would be far healthier and I think far more fun to look at the official interpreters of all of that leaked information that happened and look at it in its raw form. And that's what we have with the Gospels. Jesus commissioned them to comment on and even leak more information because they were the eyewitnesses to the fulfillment of everything, all the snaps and grams and tweets and memes that had happened from the previous 4,000 years. So we begin with the book of John. John chapter 1. John chapter 1. It simply says in the first two verses, in the beginning. Does that sound familiar? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. There it is. The first two verses of John. John's beginning reaches to people of all kinds of traditions. His use of the term word appeals to a number of people in his context, his age. Those who were familiar with Philo's logos, those who were familiar with wisdom, who created everything in the beginning. Hebrew concept of the Torah, the creator called Word of Yahweh in contemporary Jewish targums. It was not a careless thing. It wasn't a happenstance or a coincidental use of the term that John used when he used word. So when he uses the term, he also defines the term so that the mindsets of people who would read into it something else would have to be redefined. So he redefines the term to show the readers this new understanding of God. We can't say for sure that John meant to tie his word to the popular Hellenistic Greek thinking, or Philo, or Gnosticism, or the Targumic expressions, but those all come into view when he starts from the angle that he did. So the expression, the Word was God, clearly put all those old views out of the picture, or at the very least redefine them. Inspired by God's Spirit, John unquestionably, distinctly attaches his gospel to those first three words, in the beginning. And that ties the gospel message directly to Genesis 1:1. John's beginning, and even his whole gospel, builds on this theme of creation and light and life. God indeed spoke all of this into existence. All things were made by his divine word. Devout Jews grew to call the Creator the Word, and that word was more than just something the Lord said or vocalized. It was part of his plan from ages past, having a design, a strategy to create not only humans to admire, but people to be in community with. He also had a plan to become one of those humans. Suddenly, this gospel shows even the devout Jews a new angle that they had never seen. The Word in verse 14 of John chapter 1, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. God's creative power became human. John walked and talked with him. The Word who was God made flesh. So let me illustrate the concept, and I'll be done in just a moment. Let's say that I have a plan to build, to make a new home, to build a new home, and I've saved for many years to build this dream home, and one day I scrape together enough of my savings to go to an architect, and I explain exactly what I'm looking for and how I want a jacuzzi room with its own bathroom. I want a large kitchen with its own bathroom. I want a huge living room with its own bathroom and a wraparound porch with its own bathroom. I want a man cave with its own bathroom. I want a walk-in closet and a spiral staircase. And by the time I finish spelling all my dreams and desires for this house, the architect draws up a design, and then I get the bill. This book of blueprints, this plan for my new house costs as much as I've saved up, and now I'm broke. That doesn't stop me, however. I invite my friends over to my little house now to see what my new house in the future is going to look like. And so we all sit around in the little living room, and I turn the pages for them, and I show them everything included in these grand blueprints. And they ooh and they ah, and they tell me how nice it's going to be. And let's say you were there the day that I showed off my blueprints, and afterwards you say to me, hey, I've saved up a lot of money, and I've been wanting to build a house. Do you mind if I use your blueprint to build my house? And of course not. I say, you're welcome to my blueprints. And so I start saving up again to get the money I need to actually build my own house. And while I'm doing that, you build your house according to my blueprints, and everybody loves it. So fast forward 10 years. 10 years. I finally have enough to build my house. I take the old blueprints and finally see my dreams become reality. Then I invite all my friends over to this new address. And part of the way through this introductory tour of my new home built with my blueprints, somebody says, hey, this house reminds me of something. And they look at me and say, did you copy this house? No, I explain. This is my house from my blueprints. The blueprint was designed with my house in view. Now, I did let someone else copy what was intended for me. So my house is not the copy. My house is the original. And in some way, that's kind of similar to what happened with humanity. The Bible tells us that Jesus is the image of the invisible God and the firstborn of creations. That's Colossians 1:15 if you want to look it up. The Bible also tells us that God made the first humans in the image of God. Genesis 1:27. God's prior design for himself became the blueprint or the model that he used for making the human race. And although Adam was made physically long before Jesus was born, Jesus is still the firstborn because he's the divine design through which all the others were created. Perhaps we could paraphrase John for a moment and say, in the beginning was the blueprint. The blueprint was with God. The blueprint was God. That would lead us to an obvious conclusion. The blueprint became the house. Well, that's kind of a fun illustration. John 1:14, it says the Word became flesh. That literally means the Word was tented or housed or tabernacled. In other words, God housed himself among us. Jesus, the man, the Son of God, the Son, Jesus, is God's house, the body where the invisible one became visible. So a scholar can say John wanted his audience to know more than one thing about this man who was in view before the creation, no matter how awkwardly it stretched the language. This man is God. That's what John was saying. Everything of Earth's history comes into focus through the Word. So John's wide-angle lens shows us that this is not the story of just a Jewish Messiah, but of a man launching a universal rescue operation. Our role in his story will come into view very soon. That's all I have time for today. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for joining me today. God bless you richly, and look for the next lesson next week on Midweek Encouragement, and we will certainly be together very, very soon. God bless you richly. Thank you. You know we love you, and we're looking forward to get to see you again real soon. Amen in Jesus' name.